Welcome back, guys, to Java Space. So in this video we are continuing a series on Spring Boot. So we mentioned that Spring will give you some configurable defaults. Spring will impose their own opinions on you, but we also mentioned that they will allow you to override those default configurations. So in this video we are going to talk about that. So Spring allows you to override default configurations. How do you override Spring configurations? You can override Spring configurations using Spring Boot property files. Like, you can specify your log level of your application in the property file. Like, you can specify the URL of your application in the property file. You can specify that you don't want you don't want data source code to configuration in the property file. You will exclude it. Or you can disable auto configurations. We will see how you can achieve that in the next slide. You can define beans so Spring will not create one. We mentioned in one of the previous videos that if you have Spring Boot starter data JPA in your class path, Spring will configure beans for you, which among others was data source. But if you create your own data source, Spring will not configure it for you. You can also override versions in your POM file, because Spring Boot POM, what it does, it helps you to not worry about dependency management, because that is a daunting task. If you were to add dependencies in your project, and also you have to have knowledge on the compatibility and all those things, it's a lot of work to do. It requires research, but Spring has actually done that job for us already, which means when you have a starter in your dependency, you don't need to specify a version, because the parent project of Spring will do that work for you. So we mentioned that you can disable auto configuration using an exclude property of the Spring Boot application or enable configuration. So let me show you that quickly. So if you come here, let's run this application. As you can see, this application is failing because it's trying to configure a data source. So we can tell Spring, we don't need that data source. So the first way of doing that is, let me remove this, we will see it. So you can say exclude, then you can say data source auto configurations. So if we do this, our class will run, because now you're telling Spring that I don't need auto configurations. If you do not want to do configurations at Java level, which is obviously not a good practice because it requires a restart and recompilation, you can use properties like this. So I'm just going to copy this because I'm lazy to do the typing. So then I can come here and specify these properties like this. Then I can run the code. As you can see, the code still runs because now we have excluded this auto configuration. This way we are actually overriding some configurations. Then, as I mentioned, you can also override version of a dependency. So as I mentioned, that Spring Boot will pre-select some versions for you as a developer. Normally, they introduce what they call starters, which basically do not have code. It's just a way to help you manage some dependencies. So the advantage of that is that dependency management, as I mentioned before, it's a daunting task. So you don't want to be doing that. Then also Spring, they will ensure that the dependencies they have actually put together, they are compatible with one another. You don't want to be in a situation where you have included a dependency and all of a sudden the dependency is not compatible. You have casting exceptions and all that. Then why would you want to override the default versions? So it could be that a company policy says, okay, we only use certain versions at this time of the year. We can only use certain releases, all that. Or maybe you are avoiding some vulnerabilities, It has been mentioned that this particular dependency has some vulnerabilities, though, so you want to get rid of it. Or maybe a bug was discovered by your company or by some other hackers or whoever in one of the dependencies. In that way, then you would want to override the dependencies. So if you include Spring Boot Starter Web as a dependency in your application, by default, as you have seen in this application, that Tomcat has been started on port 88. Why? Because we have Spring Boot Starter Web as a dependency. It's here. So if you have that, Spring Boot would automatically choose Tomcat for you. But what if we are in a reactive environment and we want to use Jetty instead? Then there is an option for you. You can decide to exclude Tomcat and then add Jetty. You can decide to exclude Tomcat and then add Jetty. So that's how you do it.